Hey, my name is Matt Kelly. Thanks for your interest in Decisive Action. I'm about to start a campaign game with the game developer Evan Yoak of the game designed by Chacon. So what I thought I would do here is show you kind of how I'm doing my planning for the whole mission. Ahead of getting into the actual play-by-play of it, because I think that's one of the best parts about this game is that you can do real military planning using you don't have to go all the way into the weeds, and that's one thing I will say is that it's not required that you go into all the military decision-making process. But some of the tools that I learned when I was in the military as a battle captain on how to assess the mission and understand the forces that are arrayed against you is that this game can help you do that. So what I've got here in front of you right now is I've got a PowerPoint where I basically just pulled in the assets from the Vassal module. And again, for those of you that are following along, this is not final art. This is something that Chacon made actually himself, and so hopefully the wizards there at GMT will be able to add to it. But it's really kind of good actually. What you're looking at right now is a map in the Suwalki Gap. It's right there at the border of Poland and Lithuania, and what's going to happen here is I'm going to be playing the U.S. and Evan will play the Russians, and we'll be starting off in this campaign in a movement to contact. So the way Joe's thinking about this campaign type game is you'll start off with movement to contact. After that game, you will convert to usually like in this case a U.S. attack on Russian defense. And then from there, it'll transfer over to a Russian attack on the U.S. defense. So, and because this is always from a U.S. battalion perspective, you're always, the U.S. is always a battalion level. In this case, from movement to contact, the Russians will be a battalion level. The second part of the campaign would be then a battalion attack against a Russian company plus and the security zone, and then after that would be a Russian brigade attack into the U.S. battalion defense. So that's kind of the way this is going to play out right now. So we'll use this map for all three scenarios of this campaign, and it will always be U.S. in the west and Russians in the east for the orientation. So the first part that I do whenever I want to start planning this scenario here is create what we call a MACU, which is a modified combined obstacle overlay. So that's an Army term for basically an overlay that shows of the land what's navigable, what's not navigable, what's key terrain, what is the avenues of approach, what are the fields of observation and fields of fire, and then you lay all these things over together on top of what you think the enemy would kind of set up in that area, and there is where you begin your plan. So let me show you kind of how I would start this. So this is the map we'll be playing on, and the very first step is to figure out the navigable and non-navigable terrain. So what I've started here, you'll see I'm just blocking out all the terrain that I would consider less navigable for platoon and company level formations. So the green is forested area, the gray is towns, and I've got a little bit of water in here as well. So honestly, this is a very navigable terrain. There's not a whole lot that's preventing armor formations to move through this area, and so likely why they call it the Suwalki Gap, because this is a good avenue of approach for any Soviet, or not Soviet, but Russian forces that are moving east to west. So that's the first part I do. And so once I have that, then I can start to look at like what are the avenues of approach. And so in this case, it is always kind of a little bit relative. So I could show you in another map where it's not so wide open. My selection of navigable and non-navigable might be a little bit different. So you'll see down here that I have an avenue of approach through this forested area. And I've done that mainly because there's nothing else going on. There's no other open avenue down here, but it's navigable. They'll have to be in column formation to get through it, but it needs to be addressed. I can't assume that nobody's going to come through that area right there. Here again, up top, very open terrain, but what we have are these roads and these rail passes that allow the the formations to move in a much faster fashion if they're in column formation. So I've kind of broken this into kind of three different areas. I've got this northern avenue up here, I've got the central avenue, and I have this southern avenue right here. So with that, next I move on to like key terrain. So in other words, which areas of terrain allow me to observe and look into those avenues of approach. So I've got them labeled here K1 through K8. If you look at K1, it has good observation down this little valley right here. K5 is more on my interest. It's less about what I can see and more about this is a very important path for me because it's kind of right between these two obstacles here. So I want to make sure that this stays clear so that I can get my formations through this path here. Similar to K8 down here, this is a key terrain in that if I could block this up, it would prevent them from using the rest of this avenue of approach. So the rest of them here in the middle basically just are showing that they've got good fields of fire through that central area, and you'll see that here in a second. So as I move on to the next phase of this Maku, or they call it a Coca, I'm looking at my fields of fire, observation of fields of fire. The yellow ones are, once you get into the game, you'll know that that's the color that we use for like ATGMs and long range missiles. The green ones are for like high caliber tank rounds and all that kind of weapons. So you'll see here I'm kind of like basically delineating how much range I've got from K1 into this valley here. I've also got another one down here from the central area that I can move into this area or fire into this area, and then from K7 I'm trying to how much fire or fields of fire do I have into K8 to block that out. So and when I show you this next part here, this is what we were looking at, like where we think the enemy is going to come. Okay, so the northern path up here, I think probably about a company of mechanized motorized rifle infantry would be up in here. Another company of motorized rifle infantry in the south, and another one here through the center, backed up by a company of tanks. It would basically be at kind of a reserved posture that could either go north or it could go central if it needed to. Out here in the middle is where I think they're going to send their combat reconnaissance patrol and platoon to kind of vet out this central path here. So they'll want to identify where we are, where our strengths are, and make sure that this path in the middle is easier for them to get through. So with that enemy sit temp, then this is basically my plan. So I'm going to have what I would call a secondary axis up here. So right here in the middle would be my primary axis of advance. In the north and south would be my secondaries. In the north, my intent up here is to fix these guys, whatever enemy he has along this way. I just don't want them to orient down here into the central area, because that is going to be my main axis of advance. And so I'm just going to try and keep them occupied, but not really, I don't want to destroy them necessarily. I'm not going to advance on them. I just want to keep them busy. Down in the south, similar thing. I'm really, my plan is to have some fast cam delivered down here on this path to block this entry point down here, and then more of a feint. I don't really want to put a whole lot of assets down here. Hopefully the fast cam will go in, and I just need a couple elements to block that area, so keep them from penetrating that obstacle that I employ there through artillery. My main advance is going to be through the central corridor here. My decisive point is pretty much right here in this opening, before it gets into the northern path, and if anything were to circle down to the south. This is the beginning right here where the star is, the beginning of my engagement area, but it's not really an engagement area because it's movement contact, but this is where I want to do the most of my killing on of their assets. So that's everything that I want to happen from additional assets that we'll talk about in another session here is, you know, making sure I can do the most damage here and make sure that most of the enemy is coming here. So keeping them out of moving to the south and fixed up here. So that's what we would call my decisive action, is this everything that has to do with killing enemy right here. So in order to do that, this is how I would posture my forces. So very first off, you'll see I've got 3 scout elements that are going to be up here moving out first. Well, you know, hopefully I can get this far to the east, up north. If not, maybe back here I can keep them at K1 just to kind of observe here. But K4 is critical. I want to be able to see where they're coming in ahead of time. And then down here in the south is also important. I need to be able to have eyes on K8 and make sure that I can deliver that fast cam there. So after that, I'm going to have the what we would call our advance guard come out. It's basically going to be a company of infantry. And up top, I'm going to have 1 platoon up at K1. I'm going to have another platoon down here at K7, and then I'm going to have another one right here just east at K5. And you'll see those are the yellow lines where I've got them going. So, you know, I think one of the biggest challenges with this right here is going to be the spread of command and control. So I will be able to probably control both of these 2 platoons, you know, from the company commander. But you know, this northern one up here, it may be a little bit iffy here, so we'll see how that goes. All right, and then after that, my what I called up here my northern supporting axis of advance is going to be 2 platoons of armor on this here, and then I'm going to give the other platoon to the central area. So I'm going to have 4 platoons of armor in my main axis of advance, spread out through here with, you can see the green arrows ranging pretty much right here to where this this crests as they come around the bend here. And then in the south, I'm basically just going to bring some engineers to support the scouts and the infantry platoon that I've got down here. Hopefully that, you know, the fast cam works and we're not really having to worry about that. This is going to be the area where I think I'm going to have to probably spend a little bit of extra energy with maybe some helicopter or some CAS assets to make sure that, you know, they kind of maybe forget about trying to come down this path. So because I want them to come up through the central area right here. So we will see how it goes. What I'm going to do next is show you how I'm going to come up with my requests for assets and timing of such, because that's the next thing we have to figure out, is like how soon do I need them based upon this order of march and in the timeline. So anyways, thanks for your interest in Decisive Action again, and stay tuned. Thanks a lot.